I literally just want to thank the speakers that came before us today, actually. It's just been absolutely excellent, and I know there's so much content there as well, so it's just been very interesting. I suppose I've been very interested in how there's been a lot of similar topics that have been raised, I suppose, across the board with all of the groups that have presented before us. From what I can tell, I suppose some of the similar topics that have jumped out at me, I suppose, is around the digital section. I must admit I was very impressed. I think it was John Irwin, I think you mentioned about, the students being able to do Polish as a first language, because with access, I suppose, online, you were able to get maybe the teachers to be available to the students, So I just thought that was really excellent. And I suppose particularly for our new Irish, people who come to Ireland and maybe, their mother tongue wouldn't be English and so on. So I suppose it is very interesting to see that that's been accommodated. I suppose from some of the content as well, just with digital learning, I'd be curious, I suppose, to ask, you've talked a little bit about equality in access and inequity, I suppose, about not having digital devices perhaps in the home place. I suppose the reason I'm interested in this is because we're looking at adults here 18 plus, where you're looking at maybe 20% or up to 25% that have difficulties now with literacy. And then we're also looking at, say, you're also looking at the digital divide, where you're looking at maybe 50% of adults over 18. It's incredible to think that these people would have a lot of difficulty with trying to manage this new digital world we find ourselves in, and that has definitely ramped up big time in the last 2 years. So I suppose maybe just a question, if I may, to, I think, who was speaking on the ETBIs, maybe just around the links I think you were mentioning with FET and further education. I'm very much supportive of how we remove this sort of, we've spoken a little bit about different types of stigma to do with DEIS schools and so on, but also the stigma about the types of careers that you can have after school and what satisfaction looks like and what well-being looks like. And I think that those are things that we really need to tackle hard. I think when it comes to DEIS, I suppose for me, it's just that children would have access to education and be able to achieve their maximum potential. And that to me is going to be the goal of what we deliver here when it comes to a reform of the Leave Insert, is that we were allowing students to achieve their maximum potential, and that in that way as well, that we're also preparing our students and our society for the world that lies ahead of us. And you speak very well, I think, about analytical skills, and my apologies, I'm trying to remember the person who mentioned the analytical skills. I think it was Paul, perhaps. But just history is my background. I think you mentioned that you were maths, but I think analysis and analytical skills are extremely important. I suppose just if you had 1 or 2 points maybe on how or what areas could we look at achieving that in the senior cycle. Thank you very much.
So who wants to take that?
The ETBI question was asked, so I'm quite happy to lead out on that. I think you're supposed to link the digital skills in the real world, that little pilot we have currently with the department's own PPLI initiative on Polish language as a subject. That is replicating work that's previously been done with island schools, where physics Gaeliga has been provided to Irish schools. And while it would not be, I suppose, we still advocate the real connection between the teacher and the classroom, the role of digital technology does expand the possibilities, particularly in rural areas with smaller schools, to give students at senior cycle access to digital learning and probably to prepare them for the learning in the future. And just briefly, my comments in terms of the vocational pathways, etc. It's really about us as a society giving value to those pathways. It's possible today to become an accountant using the apprenticeship route. It's possible to follow the new apprenticeships into all sorts of areas, but we still probably have an over-fascination with Leave Insert points, with CEO particular courses, and I think that any reform of the Leave Insert, if you like, into senior cycle, must value knowledge, must value the skills as referred to by John Curtis, but there needs to be a way of actually, if there is a vocational pathway, for example, that it's of equal value and it's treated as of equal value by all institutions across the state, and that it's seen as such, because that has not been the experience to date. The value placed on the traditional academic learning, which has value, which has real value to us, but it cannot be the only form of learning. So I think that really the experience of junior cycle tells us that it is possible to apply skills. And I think that's the key learning from junior cycle, and to apply knowledge also, to actually take the knowledge to apply it. And when we see young people, for example, in English or in business studies, do their project find out what it is about a business in their community, and then present to their peers. We know that it's possible to have a more interactive form of learning. And I think a key part of this one is to recognise that senior cycle takes place over 2 years. And there is such an emphasis on that end of term at the end of 6th year that there is possibilities within 5th year to really focus on what assessment practices can be introduced there. We would guard against over-assessment. There must be time for learning, for research, for everything. So fine balances are being established all the time, but all of our evidence is suggesting that that's possible.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if Paul might like to
a minute left. I'd say I'm being generous, but go ahead if you want to.
The digital divide, I suppose. When lockdown happened first, a lot of students from disadvantaged areas were trying to access shopping centres to get access to free Wi-Fi because they didn't have that at home, and schools invested in a lot of the dongles to try and allow students to get access to, and that was a hugely important initiative. But equally hearing from those principals going forward to the Leaving Cert exam, approximately 40% of students opted for the accredited grades only, whereas 1% of students opted for the exams only. Now, anecdotally, what I would hear is in DESH schools, it was way higher than 40% opted for the accredited grades, and they've chosen with their feet. And maybe with the absence of that direct data, which I think we would need to get, whether or not the current Leaving Cert and exam format is truly fair. And the point made earlier around race, why would we need race reasonable accommodations if the exam was truly fair?
Thank you so much, and apologies, John, I don't think we got to speak to everybody, but hopefully next time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.